Hey guys, welcome to this new episode. Today I want to talk about mic bleeding and how you can use this to enhance and to increase the realism when you're using drum samples or VST. So first of all, I want to show you a mix that I've been working on. This is a song called Preach Right Here by a band called Butterfly Effect. So this was recorded completely acoustic, barely used samples, or the drums were recorded acoustically. So let's have a sneak preview about this sound.
One day I'm gonna preach about something, teach my children that it's okay to cry. Someday a newspaper tell me 12,000 people had died. Someday I'm gonna cough up.
So here it's some sort of dark and more like raw acoustic feeling song. It's not completely mixed yet. I'm still within the mix. I just wanted to show you about the drums. So let's solo the drums and play the same loop again. So you can clearly hear what I mean. I will skip the song to the part where the drums kick in. So you clearly hear even the singer is captured through the microphones of the drums, and every one of you recording your acoustic drums or recording drums will know this issue sometimes, that the mic bleeding or the mics from the drums capture, of course, all the noises either from the other instruments of the drum set or even the singer when the band was recorded in one room. But basically, this is what music, what the magic is music is about, and recording a band together in one room. Some engineers intend to do this, just like bringing all the musicians together in one room and then record the song, because this will create a certain feeling. This is what we love about making music and don't like about all this digital stuff that we are used today. So those drums were recorded acoustically. I just added two samples, a kick sample and the snare sample. This is what's commonly used nowadays to enhance like maybe the kick and the snare, but to keep the drums as natural and acoustically as they got. And you have to handle with the bleeding using some gates or some, you can like cut off the bleeding from other microphones. But sometimes you want to use this because this will glue the track together. And this is like the first lesson, and that I want to talk with you about today, when I skip to Superior Drummer right now to show you. I mean, you can cut off certain instruments, but the thing about the drum set or recording drums and having drum set is, for the listener and for your musicians in your band and for the producer, the drums are mainly one instrument. As a drummer, and especially when you're using samples, they are so cleanly recorded. This is what we like about them, right? But sometimes they lose the feeling of being one instrument. It's just like having a track with 8 different instruments. I mean, just as a drummer, you sometimes see your drums as several instruments. You have your snare and your toms and your cymbals and all that stuff. But basically, for the song and for the listener, what we are doing this all about for is that the drums are one instrument. So let's skip to Superior Drummer here. I've just had a drumless track, is a ballad in 6/8 time signature. Just played a little groove with 6/8, and this goes along what I want to show you about, especially when you are recording drums to songs where the drums are not the main focus, like in heavy rock or metal. Sometimes where you need like in-your-face drums over the top, especially nowadays where drums became over-processed sometimes and too punchy and too obvious. This is a certain style that most of us appreciate, but sometimes you need just drums to sit like nicely in the mix, supporting the song, but not being overdone. So let's have a listen on this tune. For this, I've loaded the Rock Foundry, the latest expansion, just to show you as a so-called sidestep that the name of those expansion packs, whether it don't matter which VST you use, really don't influence. It's just about the drums you use. In this case, I use a Ludwig kick drum, 2 Ludwig toms, and a decent vintage snare drum. So let's have a listen on the track, what I did here. So nothing special, 6/8, a ballad, the drums sound good, Superior Drummer, I mean like every VST, whether it's Addictive Drums, BFD, Steven Slate, you name it, even your modular sounds, I mean they're all quite clean recorded and it's fine. But I want to show you sometimes they lose the focus and sometimes critical listeners will hear that you use samples because there's something missing in your sound. So let's first of all, before I show you what you can do within especially Superior Drummer and what makes Superior Drummer unique amongst all other VSTs, let's have a listen on the drums on their own. So, as I said, you heard in the example I showed you in the beginning with this band, with the song Preach right here, all the mic bleeding. Superior Drummer is, at least I know, the only big VST drum software where you can activate or enable the mic bleeding on the different instruments. You can do this when you go to the mixer section and choose one of the tracks. And you see here on the top left corner, you see the bleed enabled function. And when you click and when you highlight one track, you go here to the right side and you see the option bleed from instrument. So what you can do, just click on the drop down arrow right here and click enable bleed from all instruments. So Superior Drummer is now loading. You see here on the right side again that now every other microphone bleeding comes into the kick drum microphone. So when we play the groove and we will solo the kick drum, you will hear all the other instruments coming through that kick drum microphone. Of course, the recordings, especially for those VSTs, are still quite clear because they use the best microphones, have professional engineers. So you have the bleeding, but not too much because they're recorded quite well. But basically, this is the function that Superior Drummer offers as some sort of unique function. I know some other drum sample softwares, VST, offer that you can enable at least the snare bus on different channels, but in Superior Drummer you can enable all other bleeding effects because they're recorded. And this is the reason, by the way, why Superior Drummer needs so much of RAM and disk space, because all the samples and the bleedings capture a lot of space on your hard disk drive. Anyways, what I want to show you, you can of course adjust, and this is like something that you can't do in a real world basically. You can increase or decrease the volume of those bleeding functions within microphone. I will talk about this in a minute, but just what I show you, you see I just use the basic setup that most of you recording acoustic drums or when you play to a song using Superior Drummer probably do. We have two kick drum microphones, snare top bottom, the hi-hats, the rack toms, the right cymbal and the overhead. So no room microphones at all. I've routed them out to my DAW, which is Reaper, as you might know. So I've combined the kick to this kick drum channel, the snare bottom, hi-hats, the toms as a group and the overheads. I've panned the instrument in a way that it's from the drummer's perspective, so the hi-hat you will hear on the left side and the right on the right side. You know what I'm talking about. So let's first activate, because the overhead of course captures all the different instruments. So I will now enable, when you highlight all the tracks using the shift button on your keyboard, when you now do enable all instruments, you will see here in the top, now on every instrument the bleeding from the other instruments is activated. So let's have a listen back and forth how the sound changes, and I want you to especially listen to the hi-hats, how the hi-hat sound changes when I enable the bleeding. So first without, and then I will bring in the bleeding. You will hear some glitches because Superior needs to load the samples, but I think you get the point. First without, and then I will bring it in. So again, first without. Now this sounds more like a drum set, right? Like an acoustic drum set. Clearly heard that the hi-hat went from the left side more to the middle. This is because now it's some sort of a result of all the microphone catching the hi-hat. Especially the hi-hat has a lot of hi-hat information. And high-end information, like in the upper frequencies, our ears are trained to capture then even more than the low information. So, but overall, the drum sound gets more natural, more like one instrument. And you may ask now, Mike, why I should do this. I especially use samples to avoid this like annoying bleeding. But the cool thing is now, and this is like something that offers a digital solution, now you can adjust the level or the amount of bleeding within each and every microphone. So you can adjust that it sounds more natural, and then you can fine tune especially the hi-hat, where the hi-hat sits, because when you use samples, and this is why I highlight the hi-hat especially. Sometimes when you hear the hi-hat just on the left side, it's not natural at all. Sometimes it's weird too, because you're not used to hear this on your favorite tracks, where the drums always sound more like in the mix, and this is because samples are sometimes too clear. You have just the kick and just the snare and just the hi-hat and just the ride cymbal. So let's have a listen back and forth into context with the music. I will disable the bleeding, will play the song, and then I will switch back and forth. So this, as I said, this won't work probably for heavy rock or pop or like radio-ready mix rock songs and pop songs where you need that clean, punchy sound. But I found I use this quite a lot. I mean, 8 out of 10 times I activate the bleeding. Sometimes I play with the levels within the tracks. And the main thing you have to be aware of is that your mixing decisions will change when you activate the bleeding. Because let's solo the snare drum for a second. So you hear the hi-hat is coming through, and when you now, I just did basic things on each and every channel. Let me activate the processing here. You see just a basic compressor, some equalization. Usually on a snare drum, and this I know what some of you guys do as well, they boost something around 2, 4, 3, 4, 5 kilohertz to enhance the stick attack. So let me bring this back to 0. And listen what happens to the hi-hat, which is coming through the snare microphone when I boost this frequency, which I usually do on clean samples. So you hear the snare gets more bright and more attacky, but I enhance or I exaggerate the effect of the hi-hat as well. So of course your mixing decisions will change. Usually you don't need to do that much, so just slight things to enhance the drums. But as I said, this is a ballad. The drums are not the main focus or the main instrument in this song, so you don't need to do that drastic moves. Just enhance the snare drum and especially take advantage of the fact that the hi-hat is coming through. So maybe you don't need a particular hi-hat because you think the hi-hat just has to sit in the mix, way back in the mix, so you just can blend them in the hi-hats slightly. So I will do now all the processing, which I did, as I said, on every single track. I just did basic compression EQ, nothing special. So let's have a listen again and especially work on the hi-hat, as we now have the signal of the hi-hat coming through every microphone. So now the single hi-hat microphone just supports the overall hi-hat sound. If you still want the hi-hat or the ride cymbal or the toms coming more from one side, you can do this, of course, by just slightly changing the volume fader of the particular tracks, like in this case. So what I would do, I think this song needs a hi-hat, but it's not, it doesn't need a hi-hat that's too exaggerated. So I will mute the hi-hat track here. You will still hear the hi-hat quite prominently because it's captured through every microphone. And I slowly blend in the hi-hat microphone in this case, which I pan to one side. So to just like have the feeling now it's sitting best in the mix. Let's have a listen. So finally, what of course you can do now, process the drum bus as you always did, doing some overall processing to the drum tracks. Just look here at the drums, I've combined them to a drum bus. What I did here, I threw in some reverb, slightly blended in, 20%. Some EQ using this SSL channel, which I like because it's punchy. And then finally the SSL bus compressor, which works great on drums, by the way. So I will bring them in first solo with the drums and then in contact with the music. So you hear what this basic processing do to the sound overall. Now in context with the music, first without and then I bring it in. So I hope you find this helpful. You see what mic bleeding, especially using Superior Drummer, can do to your track. As I said, this doesn't probably work for every song, but I know most of you guys, we are not just doing straight in your face radio mix pop and rock and metal songs. Sometimes you need drums just to sit nicely in the mix, supporting the song, being as realistic as it gets if you don't have access to a decent recorded acoustic drum set in a studio and good microphones. You can use software to create this acoustic glued together feeling. Hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions regarding this topic, Superior Drummer in general, virtual instruments in general, or anything eDrum related, just leave a comment below. I will try to answer everything. Thanks again for watching, guys, and see you next time. Bye bye.